joining me this morning to discuss this important topic is founder, chairman, and CEO of hc1, Bradley Bostic. Bradley is an accomplished innovator, investor, and business leader with a 25-year track record in high-growth technology companies. He's passionate about personalized healthcare and therefore founded hc1 in 2011. Under his leadership, hc1 is a global leader in AI-driven healthcare software, integral in thousands of health systems and diagnostic labs worldwide. As founder and co-founder of several fast-growing health tech companies, Bradley's ventures are building a collaborative ecosystem that moves healthcare towards proactive, predictive, and personalized care, combining AI and machine learning with proactive interventions, significantly enhancing patient outcomes through data analytics. Bradley's contributions have been recognized with prestigious awards such as the 2020 Dynamic Business Leader of the Year by the Indiana Chamber of Commerce and Becker's Healthcare Top Entrepreneur, and he's credited as an inventor on over 30 patents. Welcome, Bradley.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me. Thanks everybody for being here.
I had a mentor who told me that if you don't do a proper introduction of your speaker, you've really done them a disservice. So I wanted to give you a proper introduction.
That was a lot.
Thank you.
That was a lot. I'm worn out.
Well, you've been a very accomplished technology entrepreneur here in Central Indiana for years. I'm sure a lot of the folks in the audience know you, know your name. But some years ago, you shifted your focus to healthcare and technology. As I mentioned, you started hc1, as well as some other companies focused on using technology to make the healthcare industry more efficient, more importantly, to drive better patient outcomes. What made you shift to healthcare and technology? Was there something that you said, hey, this is an opportunity?
Yes, very much like many people in this room. I had a personal tragedy. My mother got diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, actually, when I was shortly out of Indiana University. And I was actually at the time working in consulting, looking at how all the different data silos in healthcare were behind the scenes making things difficult. And then I saw with my mom's experience actually being a patient, just how much that manifested in not the optimal care and certainly not the best outcome. And I had built an e-commerce company before that where everything was built around the end customer. So if you think about e-commerce, Amazon's the poster child. The entire process is designed to make the customer have an efficient, good experience. And you move over into healthcare and it sort of blows you away. It's designed in the opposite manner. It's for the people who are doing the work to be able to code and bill for things and try to get paid the most. And it's not as though there are people out there that are intentionally making the experience not great for the patient, but it's just not set up that way. So that combination of the personal experience and my background in e-commerce made me feel like, hey, I was naive enough to think I could make a dent in healthcare, and fast forward 20-some years, I'm still doing it.
Yeah, so let's talk about AI, the topic of today, on many fronts. I know you have talked about reactive care versus proactive prevention and personalized care. How today is hc1 or some of your other companies using AI to improve patient outcomes?
Yeah, so if you think about healthcare, it's really every single individual from the moment that you're born, you're on this journey. And the central aspect of this journey that's the most important is your health. Although we tend to think about healthcare only as it relates to when you get sick and when you're going to a doctor because you have some acute issue. But what I saw through my many different expeditions in healthcare was that there was no more descriptive set of information about your health than the lab produced. However, the lab was in the basement of the hospital somewhere. Every doctor knew that there was one there, they just didn't know where it was. And it wasn't really utilized in a very strategic way. So I thought, why wouldn't you want to construct the story of somebody's health journey utilizing that data from birth until death? And come to find that if you do that, you can start proactively preventing illness. You can get people better faster. You can help people move into experimental therapies if conventional treatment isn't working. But before there was all of this compute and all of this now capacity to utilize AI, quantum, whatever, it just becomes more feasible today to actually identify those risk signals. Because I think the stat is, on average, a primary care doctor has 7 minutes to spend with their patient. And even if that's their mother, they don't have enough time to go back and look at all of the lab data forever and try to figure out what that story is that it's telling. So come to find that there are these constellations of signals that exist that we never thought of before. And I'm excited to hear about the robotics. If you think about it, we're all machines, you know? And we produce tons of data. And nobody historically has monitored that data in a unified way, as well as they monitor actual machines that are, you know, being built in factories. So I think that's the opportunity that exists now, and lab is a really powerful point of view to use as you think about somebody's health journey.
So speaking of data, I understand that hc1 has access to, is this right, 19 billion lab results across 160 million unique patient records. So that's if that's accurate, it's a huge slice of...
It's actually about 90 billion. So yes,
90?
it's a big number.
Oh,
yeah, it's a big number.
So talk about how you're using those types of numbers to analyze and hopefully lead to better patient outcomes. Is this happening today?
It is, yes. So what we're doing at hc1 is really bringing the lab into a strategic position to make it so that healthcare is more effective at diagnosing patients and also more effective at eliminating waste. So if you look at, think about a physician, and there are probably some physicians in the room that know 100 times more about this than I do, who went to medical school 25 years ago, studied lab for 6 weeks, and there's all of this innovation that's happened. There's genomic testing, there's molecular testing, there are ways to detect things in your blood that people didn't realize would be possible. And so if you kind of fast forward to where that puts us today, it's now the case that you've got people that are being tested with outmoded tests. You've got people who are also not being tested in a way that's proactive to better manage their care. So about 20% of all the testing that happens across the healthcare system is overutilization. And then there's about 40% where you're actually not doing the optimal tests that could actually help predict or prevent or better manage somebody's care if they had a chronic condition. And the sky's really the limit with this. So one example, Nate, that gets more out there into a really powerful AI-driven use case, because we have tens of billions of lab result values across tens of millions of individual patients, and within that data, we know who got diagnosed for what when. And by the way, all of these sorts of research-oriented models and use cases do not individually identify any individual named patient. It's about understanding, hey, somebody who fits in this category that had these things happen, this was ultimately the outcome. Our data science team actually built a model in collaboration with Lilly that is able to predict with a high degree of certainty who's going to develop cognitive decline in the future, like way off in the future, because we were able to say, here are all the people that were diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia, and look back, a decade plus at all the different lab values, and then AI can actually look at that and see signals and patterns that other people, like the naked human eye and brain, would not see. And so the promise of that is, imagine a future where nobody gets dementia because you can manage that as a chronic disease, so that you can delay the onset of this terrible cognitive decline. That's the kind of promise that exists, and it's all in there. It just needs to be tapped.
So how far are we away from all of us in this room being able to go to our doctor and the doctor say, listen, Nate, you've got this coming, we got to start treating you now for it, the preventative part. How far away are we going to see this in the mainstream?
Yeah, so there is a lot of possibility today that isn't yet implemented just because the gears don't move super fast. There are things that are happening in healthcare today that I think will be considered criminal negligence if you don't fix them a decade or so from now. And a good example of that is we have a portfolio of companies. So back in 2017, I started a fund called Health Cloud Capital because I saw this pattern of seeing these deep data sets and identifying risk signals using technology wasn't limited to lab. And another major category of this is what we're doing with DecisionRx in the prescription space. There are lots of patients who are taking lots of medications that are high risk, and many of those medications aren't working for them. And we know this today. We know that 50% of the 50 most prescribed drugs in the United States have known genetic implications, and there's a very inexpensive pharmacogenetic test that can tell you what will work for you or not work for you. But because of the way healthcare is currently set up to pay for things or not pay for things, it prevents the adoption of some of these advancements. So I think it's similar to what was mentioned earlier about the curve of AI and these new breakthrough computing paradigms where it's sort of like this and then all of a sudden it just goes, straight up in terms of the growth. I think over the next decade, you're going to see this reinforcement learning with human feedback in AI integrated into every single facet of how healthcare is delivered. And I think the individual caregivers will want that because ultimately there will be more of value-based care that drives an incentive for you to get people to be healthier. So there's a whole dissertation I could talk through about value-based care, but the incentive of making people better and out of the hospital to drive more economics for the doctors and the health plans, that'll drive that pace. So I think in 10 years, you're going to see a completely different paradigm where we'll look back and say, my gosh, I cannot believe how little we actually paid attention to with our health a decade ago.
We all want time to slow down, but in this case, I think we're all looking forward to that day. I understand, I think it's hc1, your company, that is also focused on optimizing healthcare workforce and making the healthcare systems more effective, more efficient, which would, of course, save money, hopefully reduce costs. But can you talk a little bit about how you're using AI on that front?
Yeah, so usually when people think about AI in healthcare, they leap right to how do you do very involved clinical decision-making and maybe surgeries or things that are a lot higher risk better. But if you think about at its core, one of the biggest challenges in healthcare is staffing. You have this limited workforce, and it's a multivariate equation determining who you should staff. Remember years ago where all the health systems were laying off all the nurses? And then all of a sudden they were hiring all the nurses back. And, I would like to believe that using AI to analyze this combination of what's happening in the patient population and what types of specialties are most needed, that's a core area where AI is currently being employed. And specifically with hc1, we're employing that within these big health system laboratories that have to support that population. There are lots of examples, though, of that I think you can become a lot more efficient and eliminate administrative burdens, that sort of thing.
I want to talk a little bit about healthcare regulation and AI. So often the massive amount of regulation in healthcare is blamed for the rising cost, as well as the bureaucratic and impersonal nature of healthcare delivery today in the United States. Any thoughts on how you think AI could have a positive impact on improving regulation, getting rid of the stuff that drives us all crazy, and overall the quality of care?
Absolutely. Well, certainly on the side of how healthcare gets paid for, I think everybody's had the frustrating experience either directly or through a friend or family member where the surprise bill shows up and, gosh, the United Healthcare Insurance Arm's CEO got murdered. And there are psychotic people who are out there saying like that was somehow a positive signal because healthcare insurance is messed up. Like that tells you there's this nerve that's being hit within the United States public about what's wrong with healthcare. So imagine the day when there isn't all this ambiguity and it's not so opaque and you know as a consumer exactly what's covered and it's based on all these signals that are being automatically fed into the machine that says these are the kinds of preventative care steps you need. It's interesting, the example about Alzheimer's and that kind of neurodegenerative disease. So my mom died of colon cancer. And so obviously I get colonoscopies, and everybody should get a colonoscopy. It's a really easy way to save your life. But I do it, and I started young because of that fact that my mom was sick. So think about a payer environment where AI is being used to really make this more of just a fluid kind of situation that's part of life, where you know what's going to be paid for, you know what's not going to be paid for and why, what's voluntary, on your own dime. I think that's an area where obviously we need huge changes, and I think AI represents a big chance to make that better.
I think Senator Young maybe referenced this a little bit in his conversation, but thoughts on how AI could help bring life-saving drugs to the market sooner? I know that may not be directly in your space.
Oh, it is absolutely directly in my space.
Maybe talk a little bit about what you're seeing there.
Yeah, so Nate, in addition to my Health Cloud Capital portfolio, I've got some other companies that I've co-founded. One's actually called Right AI. It's spelled RYGHT. And Right is a West Coast company that's run by a business partner of mine named Simon Arkell, who has a lot of experience in pharma from a data perspective. And what we're doing at Right is accelerating the ability to perform clinical trials, all the way from how the documentation has to be created to how you identify the specific patients who should be enrolled, all the way through how you keep them conforming to whatever the protocols are. And we think that we can take like 20 to 30% out of the timeline that it takes to get a drug approved, which when you're dealing with multi-billions a year of impact, both on health as well as the revenue opportunity for the pharma companies, it's a pretty big game changer. And then also as it relates to what we're doing in hc1, we are identifying individuals who could participate and be a good match for a clinical study. So like in my mom's case, when she started failing the customary therapy, she had tried every single thing that she could possibly try in the Cleveland Clinic system. When it got to the point of she wanted to keep fighting, she wanted to find a trial, it was like nobody had an answer. I mean, I think like a couple oncologists called some friends and hoped they found something. Like, think about how insane that is. There should be an inventory of all of these promising trials that are automatically matching with those patients that are a good fit. And because of how siloed healthcare is, where the provider side is viewed as this completely different silo from the pharma side, it hasn't historically been possible. So with hc1, we're bridging that gap. So in many respects, we're solving for the big problem that kind of made me passionate about healthcare with my mom's situation. So much of this, though, is just, if you zoom out, thinking about your life and your health as an individual as this journey that's not just about when you get sick. It's about continuously knowing what's happening with your health. And obviously also, to the extent you decide to take the right steps to make yourself well, that helps a bunch. And I do think biometrics, like I've been wearing this Whoop band pretty much constantly for 5+ years. And one thing it does tell you, and you can listen to, Lieberman, or the guy Huberman, the guy who has everybody listening to his podcast. Basically, you don't have to listen to it ever again. All you have to know is, if you drink, you won't sleep as well and you'll be less healthy. That's what your Whoop band tells you. But in any event, I think all of this data that's being generated, it really gives us a bright future for how healthcare can be more proactive.
Absolutely. So last question for you. What's the most exciting thing that you see on the horizon, or maybe that one of your companies is working on when it comes to healthcare and AI?
Gosh, the most exciting. I could get into trouble with which thing I bring up, because I have lots of constituents that all have exciting things going on. I will tell you an area that has been underserved that we're addressing. We have a company called 3Aware, that is identifying risk signals in medical records related to medical devices. And so if you remember, like years ago, there was this big issue where there were leaking breast implants and there were like metal on metal hips, and people were like, how in the world could this possibly happen? And so folks had to have these terrible revisions done to their surgeries. Well, it happened because it was this like unknown issue that was happening in a bunch of different places, but there was no like uniform automated way to identify that. And so 3Aware has created the only of its kind system using natural language understanding and AI to go through the medical records and automatically identify exactly what devices are being used, everything from like sterile gauze through to like hip implants, and then identify where you've got something that is risky or failing. which ultimately accelerates the development of new devices for medical device companies. It allows you to get harmful devices out of circulation. And one other thing I have to mention is, so I launched a podcast last year, which is something I never thought I would do. And I actually thought nobody would ever actually watch it or listen to it. And as it turns out, people do. But we feature really cool innovators on this. It's called Boom Bostic Health, which is a funny play off of my last name. We have some folks that have been on there recently talking about the use of AI and devices. And there's just, I mean, the future is so bright. It's really energizing talking to folks like that.
There's a little promo on there for the audience.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, so if you have nothing else to do, like on a Sunday afternoon, we drop it once a week, and lots of really cool people.
Well, Bradley, you're doing some amazing stuff, and I'm glad you're doing it from Indiana. Thanks for the conversation today, and let's give Bradley a round of applause.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Thank you.